In the ancient world, only fire could drive away the darkness. Only fire could keep one safe in the night from those things that lurked in the shadows. For Halloween, or earlier Samhain, was a festival of the start of winter, and it marked one of the most significant festivals in North America, Ireland, Britain, and is increasingly popular around the globe. Now, though heavily promoted and globalized now, Halloween doesn't have its origins in the mass marketing of candy or even in Christianity, but is rooted in the customs of the people of Western Europe. During a time when wandering spirits plagued the land, when strange beasts haunted the fens and fields, and sometimes came knocking about the house at night. Halloween is in fact one of the oldest unbroken traditions in Europe and one of the oldest in the world. It's time to plunge into the darkness to discover the origins of Samhain, the Halloween before Halloween. Hi friends, I'm Kevin McLean. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon, PayPal, or through YouTube Super Stickers. Your support is very much appreciated. Much thanks to all of my supporters. The festival of Samhain is well attested in early medieval Irish sources, featuring prominently in tales about pre-Christian Ireland. The meaning of the name is summer's end, from Sam meaning summer, and Fuin meaning setting or ending. And it's the name not only for the festival, but for the entire month of November in Gaelic. It was at Samhain when, anciently, the most important assembly of the entire year was held. And the reason is because, according to the Celtic calendar, this accounted for one of the major time divisions of the year, that which divided summer from winter, and ultimately represented the start of a new year. Now, this division of the year far predates the medieval Gaelic stories. It exists also in Welsh, where Have, summer, and Gaev, winter, are the predominant markers, and where Halloween is known as Nos Galan Gaev, the night of the first day of winter. Most importantly, it's also found in pre-Roman Gaul. Now, despite or perhaps because of the Roman occupation of Gaul and much of Britain, we don't have much direct information about Gaulish and British native festivals or religion. Roman authorities were seriously disinterested in such things. They hardly recorded much even of their own folklore. Such fragments as we do have are due to a few intellectuals, primarily Posidonius, Diodorus Siculus, Strabo, Pliny, Tacitus, and Caesar, who took on a personal curiosity in things which would today be called history or ethnography, following in the footsteps of Greeks like Herodotus. Yet at least one native source of information has survived, the Coligny calendar, named after the place it was found, Coligny, France, which is about 90 kilometers from both Lyon, Lugdunum in Roman times, and Geneva. It was made out of bronze sheets and written in the Gaulish language. It's one of the artifacts that we can say with certainty must have been created by the minds of Druids. No lay person could have constructed this lunisolar calendar, which appears to be based on the 19-year Metonic cycle and represents many generations of study and observation. Interpretation of this calendar is trickier than you might think, but there are a few obvious ones. The year is divided into two primary sections, one called Samonios, meaning summer, and the other Giamonios, meaning winter. In the 9th century Old Irish glossary of Cormac, it refers to November as being called Mi Gam, month of winter, supported also by the Welsh name for Halloween, Calan Gaeaf. So the pre-Christian and pre-Roman calendars in both Britain and Ireland had a name for the month that was the same as in Gaul. The calendar also marked for auspicious and inauspicious months and days, which it called Mat, equivalent to modern Welsh Mad, or Gaelic Mach, and Anmat, unlucky, modern Welsh Anvat. Just like in Gaelic tradition, there are 4 seasonal festivals, and the festivals do not mark the solstices. They mark the midway point between solstices. However, these festivals were originally timed to the lunar and not to the solar month, and would not have lined up exactly with the modern dates. Now, while we don't know for certain what the Gaulish traditions around this festival at the start of the month of Giamonios was, we do know that it was one of the major Gaulish celebrations of the year, and that the Irish celebration of Samhain is its direct local counterpart. We can also say with certainty that it was the date of the Celtic New Year. Medieval Gaelic writers noted that Samhain was the new year of the pagans. It likewise matches exactly with the comments made about the Celts by Julius Caesar in the Gallic Wars. He said, "All the Gauls declare that they are descended from Dis Pater, and this, they say, the Druids have taught them. For that reason they reckon the division of time not by days but by nights. They make their birthdays and the beginning of the months and the years so that the night precedes the day." Now, this theme noted by Julius Caesar is reflected in the Welsh word for a week, wythnos, which means 8 nights, showing that the night was the primary means of delineating periods of time. Now, this makes perfect sense because the main means of actually tracking the days was through observing the night sky, the moon primarily, and the months were based on the lunar cycle. Now, because the celebration of Samhain marked the start of the Gaulish month of Giamonios, the first month of winter, which is also the period of the year which can be compared to the onset of night, with its increased darkness and cold, it's highly likely that it was in Gaul as it was in Ireland, the marker of the new year. A shift in the dating took place following the adoption of the Roman calendar and Christianity. The celebration, once timed to a lunar month, became fixed at November 1st. The standard Roman New Year was adopted by Christians, but the old date remained important and never was completely replaced. This had a reflection in myths and legend. In the Welsh medieval tale of Culhwch and Olwen, Culhwch seeks out his uncle Arthur on New Year's Day. His attempt to enter the fortress and his dialogue with the door guard has been compared to the event in Gaelic myth where Lugh approaches Tower, yet in the Irish case, the day is Samhain rather than January 1st. So while numerous tales in Gaelic tradition take place on Samhain, the same sorts of tales in Welsh take place on New Year's, which became associated with January 1st, but which were undoubtedly in origin set to the start of the first month of winter. Now, we also have clear archaeological and historical proof that Samhain not only became Halloween, but that it was celebrated across what is now Ireland, Britain, France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Spain, Portugal, the Balkans, and as far as Anatolia, wherever Celts went, they would have brought their most important festivals with them, which would have gave them a truly pan-European presence at one time. And furthermore, we can date the origins of this celebration not only back to the Iron Age, but at least to the Late Bronze Age. This was a period when the Proto-Celts settled Britain and Ireland, before the linguistic shift between Goidelic and Brythonic. Already then, in the Bronze Age, the Proto-Celts of the Hallstatt culture had divided the year into quarters and were carrying out the same types of celebrations as recorded in early medieval Ireland. Samhain is without exaggeration the oldest continuously celebrated festival in all of Europe, and one of the oldest in the world. It is a direct link back from the present to the earliest Druids. But can we date it even earlier than this? Might the festival's origin even predate the Bronze Age Celts? There is at least one archaeological discovery which provides some evidence of exactly this. Stonehenge, likely originally built by the Neolithic farmer population of Britain, is aligned to the winter solstice. Yet its design may have sparked imitations in mainland Europe. Around 2300 BC, the Bell-Beaker culture in Germany built the Pomalta ring, which has some similarities to Stonehenge, though constructed out of wood. Yet unlike Stonehenge, it's not aligned to the solstices, but to the periods between them, exactly matching the Gaelic seasonal calendar of Imbolg, Beltane, Lunasa, and Samhain. This means the importance of even the rituals associated with these festivals may even date back to the Bell-Beaker folk, who are the primary progenitors of the Irish and British peoples, as well as the mainland Celts. The Feis Taure, the Feast of Taure, was the most important royal assembly held at the time of Samhain. Every third year, the High King of Ireland would host an assembly from the entire country, which would renew the laws and pass judgments. This was accompanied by a fire ritual associated with Tlachtka, also called the Hill of Ward. All the fires would be put out, and the High King would light a new fire upon the hill, following the old ways, under the observance of the Druids, and this fire was taken and distributed throughout the land. Now, although the literary focus is often on the large centers of power like Taure, these rituals were performed across Ireland, and in earlier times across all of Britain as well, undertaken by every tribal leader, every tribal king, and officiated by local druids. Within the home itself, the ritual was also performed, with the hearth fire extinguished and probably relit by groups of men or boys who would travel throughout the community, bearing the sacred fire started from the fire lit by the local king, and binding the entire community together with the same fire. The purpose of this relighting ritual is to purify and renew it. The theme of a sinister fire which must be extinguished at Samhain lest it bring about disaster or burn down the royal palace comes up several times in old tales. In the tale of the adventures of Nera, perhaps one of the only references directly to what we could call human sacrifice is mentioned, where prisoners were said to have been hung the day before Samhain. Nera is challenged to go confront these dead prisoners who are still hanging from a tree outside, to dare to put a rope around one of their feet. And when he does, the dead man speaks to him and demands from him a drink, and he ends up having to carry the dead man around on his back until eventually he brings him to a house. And in that house, the dead spirit then spits into all the water in the house and causes it to have a deadly plague. Now, this isn't only interesting mythologically, it's also interesting scientifically. They were associating the forces of the dead with causing plague, and they had some idea also about how it spread, that it could spread through contaminated water. And so it was said that on Samhain, one must always keep all open waters out of the house, because the dead spirits who are more able to access our world at this time of year would get into the water and contaminate it. So Samhain marked the new year of the Celts, who calculated time based primarily on the division between summer and winter. Now, the Battle of Mugturad is one of the most important events in Gaelic mythology, but it actually takes place over 2 time periods. The first battle, led by Nuada against the Firbolg, takes place on Bealtaine, and the second battle, against the Femorans, is led by Lugh and takes place at Samhain. The first battle is an offensive battle. It shows the conquest of light against dark. It is the oncoming summer. But the Samhain battle, even though it is won by the gods, is a defensive battle. It is fought against the assault of the Femorans, who are trying to take over the land, to seize all of the crops, and to devastate Ireland. And so we can see that these 2 different battles reflect the 2 different dynamics of the different periods of the year, and they also say something about the gods that lead them. In the victory of the second battle of Mugturad, the Dagda steals back his harp, which controls the flow of the season. Come summer, come winter, he says, which represents the full flow of time and the cycle of the year. Though in many places in the late Roman and early medieval period, the Celts were overtaken by other groups such as Germans, some elements of their traditions would be preserved and would carry on. This was very likely the case in Gaul, where even after Christianization, the pagan celebrations continued. In the early history of the Church, there was no such day as All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Eve. Gradually, however, the Church sought different days to host a festival to honor all saints, but the selection was not universal. The Eastern Church chose a date in June, the first Sunday after Pentecost. The Roman Church, as of 609 AD, selected May 13th. However, Pope Gregory III, between 731 and 734, changed the day to November 1st. Some say it was just for convenience, to time it with the harvest season, good for hosting a feast, yet the backdrop of religious activity under Gregory paints perhaps a different picture. Gaul, Germania, and Britain were still heavily steeped in paganism. Saint Boniface, infamous for cutting down Donner's oak, had been dispatched by Gregory to take on the pagans. He banned the consumption of horse meat, and it's quite possible that he changed the date of All Saints' Day to match an existing pagan tradition in an attempt to Christianize it, eventually leading to the establishment of All Hallows' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, where the souls of the departed were prayed for. The communion of the dead as part of the celebration also directly connects to its earlier Celtic tradition, as it was believed that during the changing of the season, the barrier between the underworld and the living world was thin. Because the date of the celebration became part of the official Catholic Church calendar, all Catholic countries, to some extent or another, now carry out practices related to all 3 days. But that doesn't mean that pre-Christian traditions existed in all of these places. However, this has led to some recent claims that the core of the Halloween tradition is actually of English or Germanic origin, tied, some claim, to Alphablot, a secretive celebration scarcely mentioned in Old Norse sources, associated with the harvest. While there were certainly regions within England that continued similar traditions, including the carving of turnips into jack-o'-lanterns, this custom was very likely Celtic in origin, practiced in Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, adopted by the English. That's why the region which carried them out was in the west and north, where Brythonic influence was strongest, as opposed to the east, where English traditions are strongest. If the customs that we associate with Halloween were of Germanic origin, we would expect to see them strongly represented in Scandinavia, especially Iceland. Now, while many Scandinavian countries now celebrate Halloween as a guising and tricking festival, it's an imported custom, without any deep links to an earlier Germanic tradition. Before recent history, it was celebrated in a somber way, with the lighting of candles and the honoring of saints, exactly as is done in every Catholic country. Because Samhain was effectively a type of New Year's celebration, it was also the backdrop to the central event in Gaelic mythology, the Battle of Magturid, where the gods, organized under the leadership of Lugh Long Biemnach, the fierce striker, and the one of many skills, the Ildanach, he led the battle with the Femorans, their name meaning the ones from beneath the sea, the equivalent of the Norse Jotnar. The reason for the battle was that the Femorans were demanding the produce from the land as tribute, grain, tree mast, milk, and were coming to collect it. Lugh organizes the forces of the gods to oppose them, and like Zeus, Lugh wields the lightning bolt, represented either as a fiery spear or a sling bullet forged by Govnu, the god of fire and smithing. Yet in his true metaphysical form, he is not primarily a god of weather, but of cosmic order. Upon Lugh's defeat of his grandfather Balor, the Fomorians agree to return to be bound to their rightful place in the underworld, partaking in the aspect of generation, without encroaching on the world of the living. The secrets of agriculture are revealed to Lugh then by the traitorous King Bres. At the same time, the Dagda, the primary weather god, is able to retrieve his harp which controls the seasons, allowing the flowing of time. Ogma, the champion, likewise finds the sword of the Fomorian king Tehra. The sword speaks to him and tells of its deeds, thus earning the right to its yearly cleaning and its cleaning after every use, likely representing a ritual regarding the purification of weapons at the time of Samhain. The myth appears to have been archaically associated with the origins of the cosmos. This is why the timing of the event is set to Samhain, the start of the year. It's also the reason for the resetting of the fires, symbolizing a complete annual renewal. Just as the world began, the year began. In some fashion, every day is a repeat of the first day, and this was one reason why Indo-European rituals were focused on the dawn, probably either following the Metonic cycle of every 19 years or whether following a 30-year formula as Pliny the Elder claimed. We can expect that there was a massive ceremony to mark the celestial reset. The number 3 was also very important to the Celts, and thus every third year was a big celebration of Tower in Ireland. Though presented in a fixed form, the myth represents cyclical movement, and the battle is indeed fought repeatedly year after year. Thus every year at the time of Samhain, the barriers between the world of the living and the world of the dead is at its thinnest, and the spirits from the other world cross over. The Martyrology of Angus, written in the 9th century, claimed that the seer Lugbran went to the She Mound on Samhain to discover the cause of a plague devastating Ireland. The god told him that it was caused by demons coming out of the north, invisible to the eye. potentially the fluidity between the underworld and the world of the living, is the original origin of the Guising tradition. Similar traditions exist across Europe and beyond, associated with late winter festivals now linked to Christmas and the solar new year. How ancient the custom of Guising goes back is hard to say. The earliest evidence we have for Guising comes from Scotland, but in relation to the solar new year of 1629. A church entry remarks, 7th January 1623. James Bonnyman, Alex Petrie, John Petrie, Robert Dunbar, Archibald Law, kirkyard with masks and visors on their faces. Each geyser was fined 40 pence. It appears that during Scotland's extremist Protestant Revolution, that various cultural practices thought to be pagan were banned. This included such events as folk dancing, having blackened or masked faces, men wearing women's coats, and using the churchyard for any pastime. A law in 1555 called Concerning Robin Hood and the Abbot of Unreason banned all wearing of masks, dressing up, or taking on the character of Robin Hood, Little John, or the May Queen. These were specific plays around May Day, which is linked to Beltane and the beginning of summer, but very likely similar customs existed around Samhain. There is an entry for 1566 which confirms that fairs were typically held at All Hallows. The earliest Guising directly to Samhain is from the Scottish Highlands in 1736. However, it's also quite likely that the custom existed in far earlier times, but simply wasn't recorded. Before the modern era, surprisingly little was actually recorded about folk customs anywhere. The cataloging of these things began with a few antiquarians and eventually became more widespread in the 19th century. Charles Valency was one such early cataloger. In 1783, he published the Collectanea de Rebus Hibernicis, which contained a number of observations on the ancient origins of Ireland and the views of their pagan gods. He stated that Irish peasants went door to door on Uiche Hauna, Samhain night, collecting food for a Samhain feast that would take place the following day. They recited verses, and they threatened to curse anyone who didn't give something. So as mentioned earlier, Welsh appears to have earlier shifted the importance of the day to the Roman calendar New Year. However, Calan Gaeaf was marked out on the 9th century laws of Hywel Dda as one of the major festivals. There's also some strange poetry about the time of year. Winter's day, the gravel is hard, leaves on the twigs, pools brimming. Early in the morning, before one goes, woe to him who trusts a stranger. Winter's day, fine is a secret, the breeze and a rustle agree. Veiled speech hides a mystery. Winter's day, dear the weather, unfailing at the season's beginning. Save God, there is no Dewin. Now, Dewin can be understood as sorcerer, wizard, prophet, seer. But why stress this point about Calan Gaeaf unless the bard is reacting against a tradition that he is aware of, where people seek out prophecies on the day, where the spirits of the dead may be contacted, and when even the gods might be spotted from a perch atop an old mound? It's been one of the most important days of the year for many, for over 3,000 years, and may it continue always until the day of Erdaha. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon, PayPal, or through YouTube Super Stickers. And for supporters of the channel, I now make my major videos available ad-free. So thank you all for watching, thank you for your support, and as always, stand tall.